So when you make an sound, you are indeed making a healing sound. And that sound, because your vocal apparatus is directly innervated by the vagus nerve, any sound that you make, even now when you and we are talking, all of those sound vibrations are helping us to keep our vagal tone well toned.
Welcome to the QBC podcast, where we explore exciting new paradigms that have a meaningful impact on our day-to-day lives. I'm your host, Meredith Oak. Let's keep the conversation going. Join us in our free community by visiting qbcpod.com. That's qbcpod.com. And let's see where the quantum superhighway takes us next. Woohoo! The energy is high. The vibes are high out there, my friends, and in here and everywhere. I know you're probably all sensing that. You're all very intuitive and sensitive and tapped in. So I'm here to say we're all feeling it, and it's pretty amazing. Pretty amazing time to be alive, I would say. And I feel like things are really shifting. I'll say it's a metaphor just so the science people don't get mad at me, but I don't actually think it is a metaphor. But I'll say it's a metaphor. That we have like kind of a canopy over our third dimensional reality that we're all incarnated in too. And this canopy is meant to be permeable. It's meant to be diaphanous. It's meant to be more like a membrane than a roof, where energy can travel through. We can reach our higher minds. We can reach higher dimensions. And what's going on is that canopy has become kind of opaque and impermeable. So we feel like we're stuck under it. We feel sometimes like the ball in the pinball machine getting pinged around, and there's someone pushing the buttons, pinging us. We don't know exactly who it is or what it is, but we're feeling it. And we are bouncing off because that permeability has locked into a more rigid canopy, holding us at a level of consciousness and stuck in certain ways of thinking, and getting us like caught in sort of the loop of our own mental matrices, whatever. And the canopy is lightening up. And I used to think that it was sort of made impenetrable by other forces on purpose. But here's what I think now. What I think now is that it becomes more permeable depending on us. So when we are in a state of coherence, we're not locked under that. We're not locked within the rigid worldview that wants to dumb us down and take away our freedom and take away our sovereignty and not let us know how truly powerful we really are. That's the game, to keep us cut off from that. But we don't have to wait for anyone to do anything. We can shift into coherence, and that canopy goes back to the way it's supposed to be, as like a protective membrane, not a solid limiter. So I just wanted to put that out there because I know that a lot of us live day to day with the goal of being in coherence. And I really think that the effects of that are going far beyond, our own personal, physical, and mental health. Okay. Anyway, that's what I have to say about that. And speaking of being in coherence, John Stewart Reed is back on the podcast. He is a cymatics expert. And cymatics, as you all probably know, is sound made visual. So John was a sound engineer for a long time and had a crazy experience in the pyramids in Egypt. I have a previous podcast with him where he tells that story. If you haven't listened to it, I do recommend, because it's pretty crazy. He was an engineer. He was not some, out on a spiritual quest. And he well, I'll just tell you quickly what happened because I don't think we talked about it in this episode. So he went into the pyramids in Giza with like some of his audio stuff. He had special permission, he's with a guide. And he wanted to do cymatics experiments. And so he turned the sound on, expecting to see the sand create certain shapes depending on what sound he played. But the sand didn't just create geometric shapes, which it usually does. It formed itself into hieroglyphs. Anyway, I'm just imagine being in the pyramid with your sound equipment and you turn it on and the sound starts to shape itself into hieroglyphs. Like, what? Anyway, that's what John Stewart Reed experienced, which of course like set him on a path to dive deeper and deeper into cymatics, which he's been doing for many years. And he invented something called the Cymascope, which is used in research labs and hospitals. It's like a very, very high-end piece of equipment. It's not for personal use. It's prohibitively expensive, but he's well known for having invented that. So now, so nobody has a Cymascope in their house, I don't think. But now he has created an app where you can see the cymatics of your own voice. It's really cool. So we talk about that in this episode. You can download it at Cymascope. Or if you go into the little app store on your phone and put Cymascope, that's Cymascope, Cymascope. And you can download the app. It's like $12 or something. It's really fun. We had so much fun with it. My son like played his violin and we watched the shapes form, and my daughter had a drum. Anyway, it was really cool. So yeah, that's what we talk about today. This has been a really long intro. There's so much going on. So here's my chat with John. Please check out our brand partners, boncharge.com, for all of your circadian rhythm and red light therapy needs. Put the letters QBC in the discount box at checkout. And I also wanted to again mention the LifeWave patches, which I've been having more conversations. I kind of forgot about to recommend them. They've just become a part of my life. And I'm like, anyway, I've had recent reminders how powerful they are. And I really recommend trying them, especially if there's something you've been trying to move the needle on with your health and you have all the foundations in place. Like, try layering these on and see what happens. And let me know. I'd love to hear from you about it. You can go to qbcpod.com/patches, and all the links to all the stuff are in the show notes. All right. Enjoy my chat with the lovely John Stewart Reed. John Stewart Reed, welcome back to the QBC podcast.
Well, I'm delighted to be with you again, Meredith. Really, we've got lots to share. I know, so it's going to be an interesting discussion.
Okay, I'm really excited. We had so much great feedback on our last conversation. Everyone wanted to know more about the pyramids in Egypt. I put the list of music that you recommended for blood oxygenation into our show notes, and I also had multiple people email and ask for it. So we sent that out all over the place. So I'm excited to revisit those topics. But to get started, let's just talk about cymatics. You are sort of on the forefront of this extremely interesting field. And I'm just going to read a little bit from your website because I think this is so beautiful to put cymatics in context for everybody. When the microscope and telescope were invented, they opened vistas into realms that were not even suspected to exist. Sound has been invisible throughout history. Now, with the development of the Cymascope's instrument, the omnipresent, unexplored realms of sound and vibration are made visible for scientific study and artistic appreciation. I love that. And I love that you added artistic appreciation there because this is so beautiful. So with that as the opener, tell us a little bit about cymatics and why it matters so much.
Yeah, well, in the artistic aspect of it, brings to mind immediately, Meredith, this bridge that we have between science and art. It's not just in relation to cymatics, but there is a bridge that exists there. It's kind of a fine line very often, but no more exhibited better than with cymatics, because cymatics provides a visual medium for sound, as you've mentioned there. What happens is sound imprints itself onto surfaces everywhere around us all of the time. So whenever there's sound present, and actually there always is, even in the quietest of quiet environments on Earth, like an anechoic chamber, for example, there's still sound. Therefore, whenever sound is present and there are membranes present, then there will be cymatic patterns imprinted on them everywhere around you. But a little bit like fingerprints, they are invisible to the unaided eye, but they can be made visible. And what they are representations of the sound. So if we talk about the surface of water, for example, which is what we use now, only use water in the Cymascope instrument, which you see, by the way, behind me here, we have a portable model, if I can bring that into the frame. There's a portable Cymascope that we are now developing. But anyway, that again uses only pure water. So if you think about the vibrations of sound imprinting onto the surface of pure water, it's a little bit like imprinting a fingerprint or a thumbprint on a glass, isn't it? I've got a glass of water. If I hold this glass and know that my fingerprint or my thumbprint is going to be there on the glass, and then I put the glass down and I look very, very closely at the glass, I might be able to see my fingerprint or my thumbprint if I know it's there. But even knowing it's there, sometimes it's really difficult to see, unless, of course, you're like a forensic scientist and sprinkle on some fine powder, like talcum powder, right?
Right. Like on the crime shows where they come
Yeah,
in
that's
and
right.
they have
And
all their
immediately
special
visible.
powders and lights. Yeah.
Well, it's a little bit like that, Meredith, with a sound print on water, on the surface of water. Now think of the surface of water like a membrane, essentially like the glass, It's a way that we can imprint vibrations. And in this case, we can make them visible. Instead of sprinkling on talcum powder, we kind of dust the surface of the water, you could say, with light, special kind of light. And that's what makes the imprint visible. So now we have a means of literally being able to see sound. Now, the other aspect to cymatics and sound, the physics of sound in general, that is not particularly well known in the world, is that sound waves do not actually exist. This is a really strange situation where we have this term sound waves. Everyone talks about sound waves, including scientists. Not me, but many scientists do refer to sound waves. And we're kind of stuck with that term. So there's nothing that I can do to change that in the world of science, excepting that when I teach the physics of sound, which I do, then I make sure that all of my students understand that what is coming out of my mouth now is not a wave. If you were to ask someone, Meredith, what's the shape of sound? They will say, oh, it's a wave. And then if you say to them, well, show me the shape of that sound coming out of your mouth now, they will mime something like this. They will show you a wiggle going through the air, which is completely untrue. So what's coming out of my mouth and a little bit out of my nose, because I don't have a cold right now, is a bubble of sound. And that bubble is oscillating in and out as it expands at the speed of sound. And it's these oscillations, these in and out oscillations or pulsations, which are representing or indeed relating to the vibrations of my vocal folds. So as my vocal folds are vibrating, so obviously the bubble is oscillating in and out with all of those periodicities, all of those vibrations, right, as it's expanding. And then when that bubble impinges upon a membrane, say the surface of water, such as in the Cymascope instrument, it leaves an imprint, right? And it's a geometric imprint because what you've done when doing that, you've transposed sonic periodicities to water wavelet periodicities. So you're literally exchanging one form of matter for another in a sense, right? Because the matter, in this case in air, the sound in air, is literally moving all the molecules of the air, right? But as soon as they imprint onto the surface of water, then you're exchanging those vibrations for movements in the water. And these movements, these little ripples, you could say, on the surface, become a model of the sound made visible. We call it an analog. It's a model, basically, of the sound. So all sounds are geometric in their form when they're imprinted onto a membrane. And this bubble that's coming out of my mouth now, when it imprints onto the circular membrane in the Cymascope instrument, it becomes like a slice through the sonic bubble. So what you see in cymaglyphs, which is the word that I coined many, many years ago, simply to mean sound image, a cymaglyph is essentially a slice through a cross section, if you like, through the sonic bubble, right? That's what it is. So in other words, if you could see the sound bubbles right now emerging from my mouth, you would see this bubble with beautiful patterns on its surface and right through the bubble, not just on the surface, but right away through the bubble. And then we take a cross section with the instrument, with the Cymascope instrument, and show you those beautiful patterns. And that brings me very nicely, actually, on to talk about the new Cymascope app, because we now do have a new version of the Cymascope app, which I'm just about to show you here.
That's really cool. Because just to clarify for everybody, you have invented, oh, that's amazing.
That's your
You
voice.
invented, that's my voice. Oh, it looks so pretty. Oh, and the laugh is different than the speaking. Oh my gosh, this is so cool.
Yeah,
so for people on the audio version, John is holding his phone up to his computer and he is getting the cymatic imprint of my voice, which changes with almost every breath, it seems like.
Yeah, because what it's doing, Meredith, is it's sampling all of the frequencies in your voice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it has what's termed a fast Fourier transform analyzer. It's a little bit of a mouthful in the background. You don't see it, it's working for you in the background. And this FFT, for short, analyzer, what its purpose is to analyze the frequencies, in this case, in your voice or in my voice. And then it's looking constantly for the dominant frequency. What's the highest level of energy, within the frequencies of your voice, say? Or a musical instrument. It could be a gong or a Tibetan bowl or a crystal bowl or a tuning fork, whatever it is, it's always looking for that dominant frequency. And when it finds it within a few milliseconds, literally, it then puts the image of that frequency from a Cymascope instrument, such as you see behind me here, where all of those frequencies were imaged. They are now stored in the app and displayed on screen in almost real time. I mean, it's very fast the way it does. So as you say, as your voice frequencies are changing up and down, so that's looking for these dominant frequencies and then immediately displaying them within a fraction of a second on the screen. This is really a wonderful tool for musicians, for example, but basically anyone who's interested in the science of sound and in the science of sound from a healing perspective. And the reason I say that is, well, there's a couple of reasons. The first one is what I would refer to as drishti meditation. Are you familiar with that term? Drishti?
No, I'm not. Drishti,
Well,
no, I don't know that one.
is an Indian form of open-eyed meditation. Most meditations, you would have your eyes closed. But in drishti meditation, you have them open. And usually you're focused on something, say, like a mandala that's been printed, and you put it on a wall and you focus your attention on that, right? So that's what drishti meditation is. Obviously, with the Cymascope app, you can do exactly that. You can focus on the sounds, because there are always going to be sounds in your room. Or you could be making your own vocal sounds and again focused on that. Or another way you can do it is, one of the features of this app is that you can not only record video of a given soundscape, but you can also record still shots, still moments, right? So let's say you make an sound, which is very well known in the world of spirituality. You make your up on the screen will come on your iPhone or your tablet, whatever. Up on the screen will come your version. It'll be a little bit different for everyone, of course, but it'll come up on the screen. Then you press the camera button where there's like an icon of a camera. That saves that image. It goes straight into it doesn't go straight into your photo album. There's a little pop-up that says, do you want to save this? Right. So if you say, yes, I want to save it, it will go straight into your photo album on your phone or your tablet, right? You can then print that out. So you can now print a static copy and put it on the wall in front of you where you're going to be meditating. And now, just like a mandala, you can meditate on that image, which was your own. All of the frequencies that in your voice that created that are now going to be visually there. Now, the healing aspect of it, there's really twofold. One is the meditative aspect, because when you meditate, whether it be open-eyed meditation or closed-eyed meditation, you go into a particular mind state where the whole body goes into a parasympathetic mode. So no longer any kind of stress melts away, and you're now in an entirely parasympathetic mode. When you're in that mode, that's the mode where your body can heal. It can't heal when it's in a sympathetic state. When it's in sympathetic, you're on the go, you're busy doing whatever you're doing. That's sympathetic. But the parasympathetic is rest and repair. And that's what happens when you go into a meditation. So that would happen, obviously, regardless of whether you have an open-eyed meditation or a closed-eye, right? It happens either way. But now the other aspect to a drishti meditation, which may not be obvious to you, but it's very patently obvious to me. Say you've printed out this and you've put it on a wall, right? Mm-hmm. When light illuminates that, light could be sunlight, it could be, incandescent light coming from a light source in your home or wherever it's coming from, it will always have a significant component of infrared energy, infrared light, which you can't see, but nevertheless is present within the spectrum of light. So we can only, as humans, of course, we can only see the visible, what we call visible spectrum of electromagnetism or light. But other creatures can see in the infrared spectrum, and even humans can to a very small degree. But anyway, in this case, the reason I'm particularly focused on this aspect of infrared light is because when the infrared component illuminates the cymaglyph and then reflects back out into the room to you who are sitting there or meditating there, right? What happens now is that the vibrations that created that beautiful cymaglyph have now been modulated by that geometry. So the light was steady state in the first instance.
Okay, so if you're near an infrared light source, it is reflecting back your own biogeometry.
It is.
To you.
But the important aspect to this, very important to note, is that all of the cells in your body communicate with each other primarily in the near infrared spectrum, right? That's how they send information to one another, right? So now you understand that the light that's being the infrared component, particularly the near infrared, which is nearest to red, obviously, that near infrared component will penetrate really deeply into your tissues and communicate directly with your cells in the medium of their own language, which is the near infrared spectrum, right? So now you're receiving a healing blessing. You're receiving a healing blessing from your own
right? Of your own imprint. So you know that it is
let's just talk
biogeometrically individualized to you.
Yes. Now let's just switch away a little bit now from that aspect of the cymatic aspect, the drishti meditation aspect of healing, to talk about the healing aspect of your own vocal apparatus, right? You're walking around with a healing tool. We all are, if we have a normal voice and if we're blessed to have a normal voice. I know some people don't, but if we're blessed to have a normal speaking voice, we are walking around with a wonderful tool. Now, I'm not sure whether we talked about this subject last time we spoke, but I'd like to talk just briefly now, if I may, about the vagus nerve in relation to our own voice and to our hearing, because there's a really peculiar aspect to nature, the way nature has worked. Well, it isn't really peculiar, but it's really interesting. I'm going to share it with you now.
Okay.
When the vagus nerve first leaves the brainstem, the vagus nerve is the longest nerve in the body, leaves the brainstem, it then connects with all the major organs in your body. But before it goes down into the thorax of your body, down your neck, both sides of your neck, by the way, there's two branches of it. Before it does that, the first place it goes to is the pinna of your ear. This is sometimes called the auricle, the outer ear, right? Nature took the vagus nerve direct to the pinna of the ear. And this is why, if you touch your ear with your fingertips, you feel it's exquisitely sensitive, right? And many people think of it as an erogenous zone. Indeed, it is actually, because it is so exquisitely sensitive to the touch. And the lighter you touch your ears, the more feeling you will receive from that, right? Now, why did nature, in evolutionary terms, going back many, many millions of years, why did nature take the vagus nerve, the two branches, left and right, to the pinna of the ear? Meredith, this is nothing to do with hearing. This is not related to your hearing system at all. Your hearing system, okay, you still have these pinnas collecting sound from the environment. Why? So that you can sense your environment through sound vibrations. That's why nature arranged it that way. And if you think about the pinna of your ears, your outer ears, being a little bit like parabolic reflectors, or in this case, dishes that is receiving sound from the environment, right? That's really what they're doing. That's why, and of course, you see some creatures have very big ears. That's because they are even more dependent upon having cues from nature for their survival. So if you have bigger ears, you can hear from a much farther distance, right? In the case of humans, we've got quite modestly sized pinnas. But why did nature do that? Well, I'm going to give you the answer now. The answer is because the vagus nerve system is exquisitely balanced, and it needs to remain so. Why? Because it innervates all of your major organs. After it leaves the pinnas, it goes straight to the pharynx and the larynx. And then when it leaves the larynx, it goes on to the lungs, the heart, the kidneys, the liver, the pancreas. And you got everything, basically, all of your major organs literally are innervated, connected to the brain via this system. And that is why someone who even has had a break in their spinal column, they've fallen off a horse or whatever and broken their spinal cord, as it is, that's why they can go on living. That's why they can go on breathing, because the vagus nerve has taken over from the spinal nervous system, basically, and is able to carry on the life of the person. So coming back to the pinna of the ears, the sound that enters your ears is doing two things. One, it's going through the auditory canal and into the cochleae so that you can hear, right? Secondly, all of the vibrations of nature, whether this is the sirism sound of the wind in the trees, or bird song, or the sound of white water rivers or waterfalls, or the ocean waves crashing on the shore, whatever it is, all of these different sounds of nature are being collected by your pinnas and go straight down into your vagus nerve system to keep it well toned, because it is so important that it is well toned, right? So now you understand why I was saying about the coming back to the When you make an sound, that's actually, most people will deliberately try to make the in a low register because they know that it was a primordial sound and it's intended to be of low register. So even if you're a female, you will make your lowest that you can, with your vocal apparatus, right? And as it turns out, in all of the science that I've been conducting for the last quarter of a century or more, it turns out that all of the best healing frequencies, almost all of them, are in the very, very low registers. So when you make an sound, you are indeed making a healing sound. And that sound, because your vocal apparatus is directly innervated by the vagus nerve, any sound that you make, even now when you and we are talking, all of those sound vibrations are helping us to keep our vagal tone well toned, well tuned up, right? And this kind of makes me laugh in a way about people who talk a lot. And I'm sure we've all met people who really, they have kind of verbal diarrhea. It's a horrible term. But
Yes.
anyway, they just keep on talking. It's actually very good for them. It's not so good if you're the
Right.
recipient.
That's interesting. It could be like a compensatory mechanism of if they're dysregulated in their nervous system to keep that vagal.
Subconsciously, yes. I guess that could be true, Meredith. I've never really thought of it in those terms. Well, I think it makes a lot of sense. And then just listening to beautiful music. You mentioned earlier in your introduction about the list of albums that, by the way, I now have expanded that list of audio heterodyne healing albums. I'd be happy to send you the expanded list so that you can,
Oh, wonderful.
your
Well,
followers
yeah,
can look at
I would.
more albums that can decide whether they are right for them in terms of the genres of music and so on. I even tested recently an album that I had been wanting to reconnect with for a long, long time. That's the Electric Light Orchestra. I used to love their music, and a long time ago, 20 years ago. And so I decided I would buy, just quite recently, would buy their album again, the greatest hits of the Electric Light Orchestra. And when I did a session just last month, testing all of these different albums, including that one, it turned out that that was another album that I could add to the list, right? So just, just to recap for those people who are listening for the first time about the audio heterodyne phenomenon, this was a discovery of mine more than 2 years ago now, entirely accidental. And it related to, well, we've just been talking about the vagus nerve and how it's very low frequencies that are optimal for stimulation. So the lower the frequencies, even to some degree, the better. And the researchers who have done most of the work in this area, they've identified frequencies very low, like 5 hertz to 10 hertz, being optimal for vagus nerve stimulation. Now, that's below the range of human hearing. The lowest frequency a human can hear is about 16 hertz. So talking 5 to 10 is not something we can even hear. And yet, it's obviously that researchers have discovered that this is what provides the optimal stimulation. So,
because the water in our body can hear it,
well, feel
even
it.
if we can't hear it with our ears, but it's still having that cymatic effect.
Yeah. So how this audio heterodyne phenomenon or discovery came about was I had been reading all these research papers on the vagus nerve and these very, very low frequencies, classed as extremely low frequencies, ELF, extremely low frequencies. And I had been, well, Annalise and I have an album. I think I mentioned this to you last time, Dream of the Blue Whale, which is in the list. And we listen to it quite often at breakfast time because it's just so soothing when you're just waking up and you're having your breakfast. Anyway, so I thought, I wonder, this album is mimicking essentially the sounds of blue whales. Anders Holt, who is the wonderful Danish vocalist, accompanied by his lovely wife, Kachina, on keyboards, they made this beautiful album. And so I brought it down into the lab this day, more than 2 years ago now, to test to see what's the lowest frequencies that Anders can create. Now, knowing full well that even a bass vocalist, the lowest bass vocalist frequency would probably be 60 hertz on a good day, right? The lowest frequency that a male bass vocalist can make. So I wasn't expecting anything lower than that for sure. But when I look at it on the lab spectrum analyzer, boy, did I get a shock, a pleasant surprise, because the 12 hertz band on the analyzer was merrily dancing up and down with Anders' voice. And then,
Really?
yes, and then there are times in this beautiful album where Anders stops singing for a few moments and the keyboards carry on beautiful, long, gorgeous chords. And lo and behold, again, I was seeing the 12 hertz band dancing up and down. Now, I was so surprised at this because I thought, wow, how is this even possible? I knew already in advance that the lowest note possible for a male vocalist is about 60 hertz. So this was a new phenomenon, and I thought, wow. I then went up into our home and I brought down some more albums to test. And when we listen to music at home, it's almost always on CD. We just like the tactile feeling of holding a disc and putting it in the player and so on. Anyway, so I brought down a whole bunch of CDs, and it turns out that a very small percentage of them, just a few percent, have this effect. Most of the albums do not have this effect, and it's still a bit of a mystery. We still don't know exactly how and why in the mastering of albums some have it and some don't, and we will get to the bottom of it ultimately. But in the meantime, it means we have this beautiful list of albums which do create these very, very low frequencies. Now, you also need to know that when the 12 hertz band on the analyzer dances up and down, that there are frequencies present down to 4 and 5 hertz. And how we know that, it's the lowest band on the analyzer, on our analyzer, but how we know that these other frequencies are present is because the shape of what's termed the filter curve on each band, each 1/6 of an octave band in the analyzer, the shape of it is like a bell jar shape. So it means 12 hertz is like the center part of that bell shape, but obviously you've got sidebands, and the lower sidebands will go down at least to 4 hertz. So this is really exciting because 5 hertz is the optimal frequency, it turns out, for vagal stimulation. That's why we know that all of these albums carry that potential. And the other aspect to this, to vagal stimulation, that is not generally known, or not well known in the world yet, but it will be known if I've got anything to do with it, is that chronic inflammation in the body is a precursor for so many diseases that are incurable by mainstream medicine. So I'm talking about cancer here. I'm talking about diseases like fibromyalgia, for example, where people are in extreme pain, and there's nothing that mainstream medicine can do to support someone like that. There's no pill, there's no pharmacological substance that you can take that will reverse chronic inflammation, right? Okay, if you have extreme pain, they can give you pain relief for sure, analgesics. They can even give you prednisone and other drugs that will help to mediate to some degree the chronic inflammation, but nothing's going to cure it. However, other groups of medical researchers have discovered that optimal vagal stimulation via the pinna of the ears can indeed reverse chronic inflammation, right? And when you know that chronic inflammation is a precursor to cancer, there are studies that show that if you have cancer and you optimally stimulate your vagal system, then your prognosis is going to be improved by about 50%, 50%, right?
Wow.
So this is really important stuff. Now, when it
Yes.
comes to how do you do this? Okay, you get the list of albums. This is great. Get the list of albums, and you either pick with a pin, or you pick with your heart, or a pendulum, or however you're going to decide, which albums to buy. But then the next part of the situation is you must listen, you must experience this music, any of these albums, through good quality headphones. These have to be capable of reproducing frequencies down to 5 hertz. Now, most headphones
Right.
don't.
So if they're not good quality enough, you're not going to
You're
get
not going to get the healing benefit.
the resonance that you need to
You're
have the
not,
healing
no.
effect. Okay. And what about with no headphones? Can you do it through speakers, or
Yeah,
it has
of
to be
course.
headphones?
If you're immersed in a sound bath situation, or even just speakers at home, will provide some degree of vagal stimulation. We talked earlier, didn't we, about how nature arranged this so that the pinna of the ears is the means, like the parabolic dishes that are collecting sounds from nature, not only so that we can hear, but also to help vagal tone, to support vagal tone. So yes, you will receive some healing blessing from any sounds in the environment, whether they be a gong bath, a crystal bowl bath, any kind of live music, wonderful, recorded music from speakers. Yes, all of those things will, to some degree, support vagal tone, but not necessarily optimally. To
Okay.
have optimal stimulation, the researchers have discovered 5 hertz to 10 hertz is needed, right? And that's where this audio heterodyning discovery comes in. What's this word heterodyne? It basically means to mix frequencies together to create new frequencies. Now, the word is used a lot in the electronics industry. It's very common because in radio communications and other forms of telecommunications, it's used all of the time for mixing frequencies together to create new frequencies. But in the audio world, it's not known. And this was a really peculiar discovery that I made because I had been in sound all of my life, right? And I didn't
Yes.
know about this phenomenon in nature. And nobody else did either, by the way, because after making the discovery, I then reached out to many different colleagues that I have known around the world, acousticians, acoustics engineers, and so on, sound engineers. Nobody knew about this phenomenon. So it's really peculiar.
That phenomenon being the very, very low frequencies.
The creation of these extremely low frequencies in real time. So let's be clear about this, Meredith. They are not on the album. None of these albums contain these low frequencies, right? And how we know that is because
So it's not on the recording, but it is. But when you turn on the Cymascope, you're capturing them in the playing.
when you play it is when.
What?
Yeah, it's only when you play it.
Okay, now I understand the mystery a little better.
What's happening, right? In the recording studio, when they master an album, they roll off, they call it roll off, all the frequencies below 20 hertz deliberately. And the reason they do that, Meredith, is because speaker systems in particular cannot handle these really low frequencies. In fact, if you put these really low frequencies, if you inject them into a speaker system, the cone of the speaker flaps about. It doesn't like them. It can't handle them, right? So this is why it's deliberately mastered in that way. So that's how I know none of these albums have frequencies below 20 hertz. So this was the big surprise, right? So what happens is the mixing, this heterodyning, as it's called, heterodyning, happens not in sound, but in the electrical domain. If you think about a CD player, a compact disc player, or think about a digital media player, it will have an output. Usually, if they're a discrete player, it will have literally two RCA connectors or something on the back, right? That then connect into your amplification system, whether that be a stereo system or whatever, right? So where this magic happens is in the electrical signal path after it leaves the CD player or leaves the digital media player. It happens in the electrical domain, not sound. So all of the signals from the CD player or the digital media player, after it comes out of the laser, say in a CD player, right, for example, it then goes through a process of digital to audio transposition. So it becomes audio, but an audio signal is not sound. Audio is an electrical signal that obviously represents the sound, is sympathized with the sound, but it's not sound. It's electrical. These are electrical signals in that signal path. it doesn't become sound until it eventually goes through an amplifier and into a speaker system or into headphones. Then it is transposed into sound. So these frequencies that I'm referring to, these heterodyne frequencies, are mixing and creating new frequencies in the electrical domain, right? And then they go through the amplification and ultimately through the speaker system, or in this case, through headphones, and become literally sound that you hear, or sound in the case of these very low frequencies, you don't hear them, but your vagus nerve system will thank you for them. It will experience this optimal stimulation that it apparently needs to be properly well tuned, as it were. So it's a very
Right.
exciting discovery. And where I'm hoping this will go eventually is it will eventually find itself in clinical environments, because I would love to see a situation where there's a clinical version of this very simple technology, really, where people in hospitals that are perhaps particularly long stay patients in hospitals are going to receive this optimal vagal stimulation. So let's just back up and talk a little bit about these headphones, because if you don't have the right headphones, as you were
And
saying,
also, I wanted to know if it works off of a streaming, if you're streaming the music, or does it have to be from a physical disc playing?
yeah, I hear what you say. So, well, in terms of streaming, unfortunately, most music that you will receive via, say, YouTube or any other platform is compressed, heavily compressed. This means that it's
Okay.
not high quality. To get the results that we're referring to here, the healing blessing, you really need wave files. When you download music digitally from online, most of the music that you will download would be MP3, for example, would be which heavily compressed. This means a lot of the data is missing from that. And we, as humans, unfortunately, have come to accept this very poor version of music that we experience. We've got used to it. It's not until you actually do a direct comparison with MP3 versus WAV files, for example, or FLAC files, that you then go, if you have a direct comparison where you have two speakers and one plays, or two speaker systems, and one's playing MP3, and then suddenly you turn a switch and it goes to WAV. Oh, immediately you notice the difference. Wow, this is so much nicer, you see. But generally, people just get used to this very poor compression, MP3 compression. So no, it won't provide the optimal results. You
So
must have,
you want to choose your music and then order a properly mastered DVD, CD, I mean.
yeah, if you think about,
Okay.
we were talking about Dream of the Blue Whale there, Anders Holt. His website is Anders, Anders, and then a hyphen or a dash in the middle, and then Holt is HOLTE.com. If you go to
Okay.
his website and you were to buy, their Dream of the Blue Whale, they do supply them as CDs. You can buy them as CDs, and you're going to get very high quality, right? But a lot of people are not buying CDs these days, and they're going for digital downloads. Well, the standard digital download from Anders Holt and from most suppliers of music is MP3. But if you ask Anders for the WAV file version, he will supply it, right? And
Okay.
that's also true of most music, most indie music, for example. You can buy it as WAV files or FLAC files, which is another
Right.
form of audio
So
compression.
you really want to make sure that if you're going to do the downloaded version, that you specify you want the WAV file.
You have to have this very high quality. And
Okay.
the other thing you have to do is to listen only through high quality headphones. So earbuds, these little earbuds, they won't cut it.
No.
They fall off at 20 hertz. Bone conduction headphones, they won't cut it. They fall off at 20 hertz, right? Or even not even higher. Then if you talk about Bluetooth headphones, they won't cut it. So any
yeah, no.
wireless,
My audience doesn't do Bluetooth headphones.
wireless
They don't
headphones,
want a microwave in their ear.
no. You must have cord attached headphones. And even when you buy cord attached, you must look for the frequency response, published frequency response, and make sure it starts at either 4 hertz or 5 hertz. Then you know
Okay.
you're going to get the
That's
very
super
best
important.
quality and healing blessing. Otherwise, most headphones will be published at 20 hertz starting frequency.
Okay. So the standard headphone, if you're not checking carefully, is 20. You need to check to make sure it's 5. And you need to make sure the source of the sound or the music
It's high quality.
is high quality and not a compressed file. I'm so interested in this compressed audio because it's reminding me of like our LED light bulbs where we keep kind of compressing everything to what we think is just the stuff we need. And we're leaving out so many things, so much across the spectrum that our biology really needs, whether it's light or sound or anything else. So interesting. Is there, for headphones, is there a brand? I think you mentioned one last time.
The brand I particularly mention is Bayer. That's a German brand, Beyer. Bayer Dynamic. What are your headphones?
These are, they say DT770 on the side.
That's right. Well,
Is
that's
that
the
the
model
one?
number that I recommended. So Bayer Dynamic, and then the model number is DT770 Pro. Now, when you look, if you're going to buy these headphones, the wonderful thing about these headphones, Meredith, is that they're not hugely expensive, even though you're getting this tremendously great frequency response. It starts at 5 hertz and it goes up to 35,000 hertz, which is really amazing for what you pay for these things. Headphones, if you buy, you can pay $1,000 for headphones, right? And then you might get a tiny little bit extra, in the specification. So this is why I go particularly for this model, because they're not outrageously expensive, and yet they have this superb frequency response.
Yeah, I do. I don't remember how much these were, but I think they were less than $100.
For
They weren't
100,
hugely expensive.
$120
Yeah,
ballpark,
somewhere around there.
somewhere in that range. So it's really good value when you think what
Yeah.
healing you're going to get from these headphones. Must talk about the ohmic value. This is the resistance of the headphones to a signal.
Okay.
So when you look at the model DT770,
Mhm.
it's available in several different ohmic values. It's available in 32 ohms. That is only for PCs, Android devices, stereo systems. If you have an Apple product, you go for the 80 ohm model, right? Any Apple device, it could be an Apple iPhone, iPod, iPad, or iMac computer, any of those is the 80 ohm. And then you'll also
Okay.
see a 250 ohm. They are only for professional recording studios, so forget that one. But then you'll also see another model, which is DT770 Pro X. And the X is 48 ohm, and that is universally acceptable for Android and Apple products. The X is a kind of special edition that they've just brought out. I don't know how long it's going to be there, but if you go for the X, it means you can use it on any device, basically. So
Okay.
there you go.
Got it. All right. So we're squared away to make sure we have the ideal headphones to hear those lower frequencies, which we require for our vagal toning. So I have a teenage daughter and they're all back into vinyl. So we have a record player in our living room. What about listening to record players? Does that
Superb.
have the effect?
Absolutely.
Is that even better than CDs?
No, it's not. It's not even better, and because there are some limitations even with vinyl. However, I would say it's certainly equal to CD quality, and it's analog, of course, which is a wonderful thing. So there's no chopping up at all, but there's still some limitations because you are literally talking about a stylus wiggling its way through a groove. So there are still some limitations. But if you get a really high quality pickup cartridge, it have to be high quality again. It's the same as like when you buy any stereo equipment, it should be high quality if you want to get the best results. And the same is true of pickup cartridges. So again, you can look at the frequency response that's published for pickup cartridges. There are so many really cheap vinyl players now coming out, manufacturers jumping on the bandwagon because vinyl's starting to come back. So you've got to beware a little bit when you're doing your buying. But the best quality vinyl records for sure equal and to some extent even exceed CD quality, but you've got to then only get the very best, of course.
Okay. So the quality matters. So vinyl, CDs, WAV files, and make sure we have the right headphones that are capturing those lower frequencies.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think we talked about this on our last interview, but when you explained about those lower frequencies and the vagal tone and how it oxygenates the blood.
My vision for the future in hospital environments and clinical environments is that patients would receive music, experience music through high quality headphones, just as we've been talking about. But in addition to that, they would receive the same music, or at least the bass register of that same music, through tactile transducers that are embedded into the mattress or the substrate of the bed that they're lying in, right? Now, the reason for that is because these tactile transducers can go down to 5 hertz very, very easily, right? Unlike speakers, as we were talking earlier, most speakers, when they're getting down to 25 hertz, they're starting to not feel very comfortable. The cone starts to flap around quite a lot. Even big woofer speakers don't like anything lower than about 25 hertz. But tactile transducers is a different style of transducer that can go right down to 5 hertz. So if you had a hospital bed in which were embedded these tactile transducers, it would mean that this music that the patient is experiencing through the high quality headphones is simultaneously experiencing through the bass register is coming up through the mattress into their body, basically. And what that does, as we talked about last time, it's causing oxygen that's dissolved in the bloodstream of the patient to bind more efficiently to the hemoglobin molecules in the red blood cells. In other words, it's helping the oxygenation level of the patient without them having to do anything, right? I mean, basically, the whole point of the heart is to circulate the blood primarily, but the secondary aspect of the heart is to create pressure pulses, which we call heartbeats, right? These pressure pulses are low frequency sound that literally causes the oxygen. It's one of the mechanisms that causes the oxygen dissolved in the bloodstream from your respiration to bind to the hemoglobin and therefore bring healing oxygen to all of the tissues of your body. Now, if you're supine rather in a hospital bed and perhaps you've got weak respiration, you've got weak heart, right? Then you are at risk, obviously. I know that, okay, they can give you oxygen through a cannula or whatever. They can give you additional oxygen. But here's another way for you to improve the efficiency of absorption of oxygen in your body. And oxygen is the key healing molecule. It's needed for all of the healing mechanisms, almost all of the healing mechanisms in your body. So you need a good supply of oxygen to heal, basically. Therefore, if you were experiencing music, not only would you, through these good quality headphones, simultaneously through the tactile transducers in the bed, wow, you would really support the healing of that patient. And that's the vision that I have for the future of frequency medicine in the clinical environment.
Yes. You could have the headphones, the vibration, maybe a red light panel.
Oh, yes.
And a cymatic printout of your ohm.
Yeah, you could
and
have
that could
as
be
well.
a mandatory session every day in the hospital. Or there are people here with healing clinics. Like this is all the things.
No, but that it is a bit of a challenge to be able to communicate the science of frequency medicine to mainstream clinicians who have got.
That's why we're all here, John. That's why the QBC podcast exists. We're going to do it. I believe in us. I believe in you. You are going to make this a little more mainstream.
I was just talking yesterday with a university in the US teaching university who have a med school, and for the first time, they're going to be teaching nutrition, Meredith. Now, what do you think of that? Lo and behold, that good nutrition actually helps to heal the body. Well,
I
what a
know.
surprise, you know.
We're here talking about lower frequencies and frequency, and they're like, actually, if you eat real food,
Yeah, so,
that's where they're at.
you know, a long time ago, I think it's going back almost 20 years now in the UK, there was a wonderful program. I'm not sure, I don't think it was on BBC. In my memory, I think it was a commercial program channel. But anyway, it was called The Food Hospital. It wasn't literally a hospital, it was a program, but it just had that title, right? But anyone who came into this program for healing had to be someone who had gone the mainstream route, had been to their GP or their hospital for whatever problem they had, and they had given them all of the standard protocols, and it had not helped. So this was
Yes.
these were the people who could not be helped. And then they came to this program, the Food Hospital, and in every single case, these people were healed, were cured of whatever their malady was, right? Every single case, just through high quality nutrition, very, very targeted nutrition, by the way, not just average nutrition, but targeted very carefully. And then after, I don't know how many months of this beautiful program, they discontinued it. Now that I always wondered
Of
about
course they
that, you know,
did.
who pulled the plug on this program and why, when all of these
Indeed.
people were being helped, right? And then it also
Yeah.
makes me question, why do med schools not teach nutrition? Why? What is the reason behind that? Perhaps this university in the US, I better not name them right now, but because, you know, I don't know where they're headed with this, but perhaps this university in the US, who is beginning to teach in the med school section, beginning to teach nutrition, perhaps that will be the beginning, Meredith, of the snowball that gradually gathers, and other med schools will take heed and say, oh, I think we should add nutrition. This crazy situation when high quality nutrition is needed by the body for all the healing processes. So it's really amazing.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. And they don't even study nutrition. You know, you mentioned how difficult it is to translate frequency medicine and frequency science into mainstream. And it's like, why is that so hard? Like, why is the foundation not being laid for that? Because the stepping stones to understand through all the different mechanisms are there.
Yes, and also Meredith.
So I'm not gonna posit an answer to that,
No, but
but I will ask
it's becoming
rhetorically.
easier. In fact, you know, recently I'm still teaching a course with the Shift Network, and I wanted to be able to share with the students in this course what AI thinks about this situation with mainstream and where are they headed with it in terms of alternative technologies such as light and sound, for example. And so I asked a question of AI, and this particular AI that I asked came back with a wonderful expose of how mainstream medicine is gradually moving toward a more holistic view. And I thought, wow, this is really amazing. Because when you think about it, Meredith, AI is the mainstream view. It's gathering, this is a computer system that's gathering data from all around the world, basically, but it's a mainstream view that it's giving you. It'll never give you anything alternative, not generally anyway. And so I was really excited to see this. But then also other information which gives me support for this idea is the fact that if you go to your doctor with some kind of a skin condition and they refer you to a hospital, for example, to a dermatology department, they will give you light therapy. You usually call it phototherapy in a hospital setting, or photobiomodulation, which is a branch of frequency medicine, right? It's light.
Indeed, yeah.
It's not a drug.
I mean,
Right?
if you're lucky to get a hospital that does that, yes.
Yeah, most of them
Yes.
do. And then the other aspect to this, which again gives me heart, is this new clinical term, music medicine. This is a new clinical term, right? So it's not,
Oh, I didn't realize.
where it's not music therapy. Music therapy has been
Mhm.
around since the 1950s, I would say, and is still very much very strong therapy today, where you have a qualified therapist who will sit with the patient and help the patient make music choices. And also a psychological, it's a talk therapy as well as music, right? But now, lo and behold, Meredith, they have discovered that music has healing qualities even without the therapist, right? And this is really good news. And they've added this new clinical term, music medicine. So you won't find every clinician talking about it yet. But again, it's a snowball that has begun and it will grow with time. And there are many studies now, evidence based medicine, showing that
Yes.
music has therapeutic qualities, right?
Wonderful.
It is wonderful.
What I love about it too is it's fun, right? Like go outside and sit under a tree. And that's healthy for you. And listen to the sounds of nature and listen to music. And it doesn't have to be terribly complicated. And these are things we can do ourselves because as you mentioned, you go to so many people are in that gray area where they go to their GP and they're not in a crisis and there's no real answer in mainstream medicine. And yet their quality of life is suffering to some extent. And so I love to be able to share all of these beautiful things that we can do that we're meant to be doing. And I have one last question around all this. In the last conversation, when I was reminded of an experience I had with my third pregnancy where I was due to go into labor, but I wasn't going into labor. And I attended a family drum night at my children's school. So I was in a room with this big circle of drummers. And that night I went into labor. And so after you talked about the effect of sound on the body, I thought, oh, maybe that was a connection. And I'm wondering too about live music because that, as you said, as the popularity of compressed streaming music, that's basically all anyone listens to, especially the kids, because they all listen to it on their phones. But in parallel to that, there is a huge increase in young people going to live music, like like local concerts, big concert, all of them, they sell out every time, all the time. Like the children, the young people are just desperate to get in front of the music and the musicians. So what's the impact of being there in the room with the instruments and the singers?
Wow, it's a really wonderful impact because, of course, there is no chopping up. You get the real music from the instruments, well, via the amplification system, of course, but these amplification systems are extremely high fidelity. So you're going to get absolutely superb massage and all of the benefits from the music that you could possibly receive because we've talked today about oxygen binding that happens with the low frequencies. We've talked about the vagus nerve system getting a good tune up via the pinna of the ears, but we haven't talked about nitric oxide. And nitric oxide is another wonderful molecule in the body that it's not as important, let's say, as oxygen, but it's second in importance, and that's created through resonance in the paranasal sinus cavities and in the lungs. So you won't get it through listening to music through headphones. You get all the other benefits, but you will get, if you go to a music concert, your paranasal sinus cavities will get a good, really good stimulation where the nitric oxide is created. Oodles and oodles of nitric oxide will be created there for you and in your lungs. So the paranasal sinus cavities have Helmholtz resonant frequencies between 1 kilohertz, 1000 hertz, and 2000 hertz, which you'll get from live music for sure. And the lungs between 100 hertz and 150 hertz, depending on your body size and so on. Again, you'll get that, lots of that from live music. So when you or I or a young person goes to experience music at a concert, like I'm thinking of Taylor Swift here in particular, for a reason I'll come back to in a moment. But if you go to a concert like that, you're going to come away with your bloodstream super oxygenated because nitric oxide, so not only because of the oxygen binding that we've been referring to, but also one of the many aspects, blessings that you get from nitric oxide is vasodilation. So all of your blood vessels are going to be dilated beautifully and naturally by the nitric oxide that will be created by the higher frequencies, particularly in the paranasal sinus cavities, from this live music. So, oh my goodness, you're going to get so many healing benefits. And the reason I mentioned particularly about Taylor Swift is because this wonderful new Cymascope app that we talked about earlier, I did a little demo video which is embedded within the app, because navigating around apps can sometimes be a little bit tricky if you're not familiar with them. It's all supposed to be intuitive, but it's not necessarily in many cases. And in this case, there are a few aspects of the app that I thought, well, I better do a little demo. And in this demo, one of the aspects I talk about, Meredith, is when you make a video, because you can press a record button within the app. And so if you're making vocal sounds or musical instrument sounds and you're seeing all this gorgeous imagery coming up, you can record that. Well, let's say you go to a Taylor Swift concert, or let's say you're downloading or you're listening to some Taylor Swift music on YouTube, just as an example, right? And you are making visible some of Taylor Swift's beautiful vocals and the instrumentals that go with it. And then let's say you would post that video on TikTok or YouTube or wherever, Instagram. Can you imagine the consequences of that? Of you recording some of Taylor Swift's music and making it visible, and then posting that online. Oh my goodness, you would be in so much trouble, right? So this is why in the app, when you press the record button, the first thing that happens is there's a pop-up note, a warning notice telling you only use your own music,
Yes.
not Taylor Swift's or anybody else's, because that's copyright. You can't do it. If you did it, you would get into a lot of trouble.
A lot of trouble. Yes. I've recently become deeply familiar with the community guidelines on YouTube, and copyright infringement is a deletable offense.
Well,
You will get kicked off right away.
Gotta be so careful.
Yes, no, you do. But that's amazing to hear about the live aspect.
It is, and also you
know,
mentioned drumming,
yeah.
Meredith, drumming.
Mhm.
We talked earlier about this idea that your heartbeat, they are actually pulses of low frequency sound. The center frequency of a heart sound average is about 100 hertz, sometimes a little bit lower than that, but it's a low frequency sound. And that causes oxygen to bind, or helps to that process of oxygen binding that's dissolved in the bloodstream, and then it binds to the hemoglobin every time there's a heartbeat. Well, the same thing happens with drumming. Every drum beat is a pulse of low frequency sound, and low frequency sound penetrates deeply into your body. In fact, if it's low enough, it goes right through your body. Actually, a very low frequency sound goes traveling literally right through your body. Can you imagine now that if you're involved in a drumming circle, that every single beat is helping the oxygenation level of in your bloodstream? So that's a wonderful thing. It's a very healing thing to do, to drum. And of course, it's one of the first musical instruments to be created by humankind. I don't think it's the very first. I think the very first was actually a flute using animal bones. But the drum came, not much later than that. And so it's a wonderful thing to do, is drumming. Very healing.
Okay. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to download the Cymatics app, and then I'm going to go I have a big drum that I got for my children when they were younger, and I'm going to drum into that.
You see, if I go back to the app now, just quickly, hang on, if I go back to the app now, you might be able to see here, for those of you who are actually watching this on video, where my finger is here, you might be able to see musical notes popping up, right? So it's basically showing you that those frequencies, the dominant frequencies that I mentioned earlier, it's showing you the dominant frequency in terms of a musical note. Well, this app actually goes way beyond what's possible for a human being to sing. It goes down to 27 hertz, which is the lowest note on a piano. I mentioned that the lowest note that a human being, male, can make is about 60 hertz. This goes down to 27, and it goes way up to 2,200 or something, which is again way beyond a female soprano can make. So it's much broader spectrum bandwidth, you could say, than a human being can make. But your drumming will probably, if it's a big drum, will probably get down to that 27 hertz. So what you should do, Meredith, is when you're playing the drum, watch that note and see how low you can get. It'll show you the note, the lowest note that the drum can make, and that'll be interesting.
Oh, that'll be so fun. That'll be my Saturday afternoon project with the children. Just drum into it.
You know, the other wonderful thing is it's only $12, and a lot of apps have so much where you have to buy other stuff within the app. This is not the case. This app is only $12, and that's it. You don't pay anything more ever. And yet, within the app, if you go to that top left burger bar, you'll find not only a demonstration of how to use the app, but you'll also find a section on articles. And those articles have some really wonderful information about sound therapy, music medicine, and so on. So
beautiful.
A repository of information that we can add to, by the way, because that aspect of the app, the articles section, is not within the app. It's like online. So we can add to that. So as you buy the app, but next month we'll probably add another article, and then next month another one, and so on. So you'll be building a library of specialist knowledge within the app, and that's a really great tool to have at your disposal.
Oh, that's really wonderful. Yeah, we have a lot of practitioners who listen to this, so they love the new information.
Excellent.
So beautiful. And just to recap, because I think you're bringing together so many of our worlds here, John, with our bodies are filled with structured water, communicating with light, communicating with sound. And now you've created this app where we can print out the structure of our own voice imprint. And so we would record our voice, choose an image that speaks to us, print it out, put it up while we sit outside under a tree and meditate, do open-eyed meditation, or during our infrared sauna time or a red light therapy or whatever people do, and have the light and the sound and the visual biogeometry that came out of our own frequency reflecting back to us. Am I capturing everything?
You are.
Because this is incredible.
It's a really, you really understood exactly what I've been referring to. It is an exciting future that lies ahead for humankind, I believe.
I think so too. I think we're just so lucky to be alive right now. There's just so many amazing things happening. And thank you for contributing to that with your wonderful work. We all really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Meredith, for providing this wonderful platform where knowledge can be shared widely. And I'm really grateful to you for that. And it's been very enjoyable today, and I hope we do it again sometime. There's lots more we could talk about.
I think we will. I feel like every time we're just barely scratching the surface. So yes, let's do it again in a few months, and I'll ask everyone to report in on their cymatics meditation, and we can talk more about it. I would love that. Thank you, John.
Been a great pleasure. Many blessings, Meredith. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This has been the Quantum Biology Collective podcast. To find a practitioner who practices from this point of view, visit our directory at quantumbiologycollective.org. If you are a practitioner, definitely take a look at the Applied Quantum Biology Certification, a 6-week study of the science of the new human health paradigm and its practical application with your patients and clients. We also love to feature graduates of the program on this very podcast. Until next time, the QBC.